one of the things that we also talked about the last time we met was about seeing the forest and the trees.
Yes.
And the systems being the forest, and the students and the faculty members, the stakeholders being the trees, things that are happening on the ground. And where I want to take us to now is when you consider both of those things. I feel like you get folks who work in systems, you get folks who are working in the theoretical concepts around agility and innovation and AI policy, governance models, and things of that nature, deep learning and how we can promote that. But then you get the realities of what's happening on the ground. And as someone who's done research on innovative course models in a very diverse undergraduate, York University in Canada is the second largest university in Canada, incredibly diverse student population, culturally, socioeconomically. We have over 65% of our students work either part-time or full-time, which is really indicative of a lot of learners nowadays. And when we run innovative stuff out of there, Cristi, I'm telling you, the students know what we're trying to do. And they will straight up name it. Focus group, I had a student say to me, listen, I understand you want me to be more than Siri or Alexa. Okay. I get it.
Yeah.
But I just want an A.
That's right. That's that surface learning we're talking about.
That surface learning. So we can say these systems things. We can create these environments for students that are more challenging, that ask them to look at foundational knowledges through integration and examine the caring component. But then you look at that from an assessment standpoint, and all of a sudden you get a little more nuanced. There's a little more subjectivity. There's a little more process-based demonstration, like how did you get to an answer versus did you just get the answer right?
Yeah.
And students have a hard time accepting the nuances because they want to go in, they want the degree, they want what they think but this is changing because a lot of students understand that the degree doesn't hold the same value, right?
Right.
But it's kind of, we're caught in this juxtaposition in the trees here where students are like, stop changing everything. I just want you to tell me what the answers are. I'm going to get like, what chapter do I read in the book? Then I'm going to regurgitate it and I know what I'm going to get as a grade. I can see the line of sight between my effort and my result. But in this world where we have more of a growth-based assessment model, competency-based pedagogical approach, it's not A plus B equals C every time.
It's not.
And it's really hard to look at the changes at the systems level. I want these things to happen. We want these things to happen because we know in the end it serves students.
It does.
But I particularly want to ask you about that idea of agency and learning to learn. Like, in your opinion, so learning to learn, if we could unpack that as this is what learning is, guys. So like, ladies and gentlemen, this is how we approach learning in the world. It means failing. It means trying again. It means growing over time. It means it's more messy.
Failing forward.
Exactly. If we could just help students understand, human beings understand. Adults don't know this as well, by the way.
Yeah, they do. Some of our faculty don't know this, which is why you're asking them to take on a mental model in which they have not been trained. If I'm a computer scientist, I know my discipline, but I haven't in most cases. I remember a couple of years ago working with a young computer scientist who said, this Bloom's taxonomy, like I've never seen it before. Like really had no understanding of teaching and learning science, metacognition, like, oh, there's a thing such as cognitive load. Like there is only so much information that someone can take in. So I think when you talk about the forest and the trees, I think it is a good acknowledgement to the complexity of higher education, right? Like there are multiple stakeholders. They each have their own needs and priorities. And so when we talk about how do we move people along, I really think I do a lot of work in mentoring young leaders coming up in higher education. And I really love, and I can't remember the name of the book now. Well, there's a book and there's an article, but the article that I use a lot is around zooming in and zooming out. So teaching leaders how to figure out, sometimes you need to look at that 60,000 foot view, but sometimes you need to be right up on it and really focus in and zoom in and really think about what are the tactical as well as the strategic opportunities that are ahead of you. And I think that the book, I don't know if you've read Seeing Around Corners, How to That Spot Inflection Points, it's by Rita McGrath, I believe. And she talks about how we get all this great quantitative data, but the qualitative data really helps us to see around the corners and what kinds of trends and things are coming around the bend. So I think that we are finding that learners are asking for agency and choice and where they put their dollars. I had the wonderful pleasure of meeting with a woman, Naomi, who is with Velocity Network, who's doing a lot of work on how do we help learners create interoperability around the kinds of badges and skills they acquire and where they take it. And she introduced me to a new term called self-sovereignty. And she said, one of the things that we need to be able to do is to help learners understand I can create my experiences and my skills in any way I decide. I may want to elevate this one, I may want to hide that one, but right now everything's either locked in a wallet or it's locked in a badge opportunity, or they don't speak to each other. And at the same time, I as the individual, I don't own my own data. So she started to talk to me about like, how do we create opportunities for self-sovereignty around this? So I think it gets back to your point around agency and how do we reduce some of these barriers that we're finding for institutions in really being able to evaluate faculty, to even the kinds of metrics that we use to think about success for students. We're missing this larger ecosystem of opportunities there.
And if it's not our lived reality, like if a faculty member's lived reality is that their whole performance evaluation is about student evaluations of them, and that they live in a very, very risky environment in terms of tenure and promotion tracks, if they live in that older way of conceiving of carrot and stick competitive progress, then that's not their lived reality. The reality we're asking them to create for students, which again causes cognitive dissonance in terms of how do you expect me to create something or to have a course or value the way of looking at teaching and learning the way that we're talking about here. I want to challenge you a little bit because I know students look for agency and choice, okay? But they are also, it's like, again, forest. They want it at the level of the forest. I want to be able to see my degree in an integrative way. I want to be able to mix and match. I want to be able to chunk information. I want to be able to look at my skill set, my developing skill sets as like a renaissance a set of different courses that speak to me, who I want and who I am and the kinds of jobs or career opportunities I want to explore. Yes, they want more choice and agency at that forest level to make decisions about their learning trajectory, how they participate in it and where it takes them. But at the level of the course and the learning experience itself, they still crave structure,
they do,
predictability, and certainty, because that's where risk exists.
Yeah.
And do you know there's a great I'm sure you are aware of it. It's an old psychology experiment. I'm unfamiliar with its origin, but you can Google it, where they put a lot of humans in an open field and there's a car in the middle of the field. And there's two versions of this experiment where there's no fence around the humans.
Okay.
And what do? They all congregate near the car.
Okay.
And then they put a fence around the car, like a wide fence. So now it's like an enclosure, 100 square meter enclosure. Now, all of a sudden, all the humans are scattered all over the place. They feel comfortable to move around because there's a fence.
There's a structure.
They see the barriers. They see the structure. They see the edges. We talk about this in developmental psychology with infants, right? They need to see where the edges are. We're constantly testing where the edges are. So it's a really delicate balance.
It is a delicate balance.
Choice, opportunity, micro-learning, micro-credentialing, badging at the systems level, at that forest 60 feet view level. When we think of designing a course, we need to be cognizant that students need to see that fence.
So I agree with you. I don't think that there is anything wrong with that. However, is there a way we can co-construct that fence? Is there a way that I am not so set in stone with my 16 weeks or 12 weeks or the things that I need to cover, because these are topics, that I can't invite you in to co-construct where we define that fence and push you out of your comfort zone to say, okay, so when you leave this class, what is important for you to know? Here are the things I think you need to know, but what is important for you to know? And can we create a social contract, because learning is social, around how we do that? I think the challenge for a lot of us in education is that that malleability, that adaptability, that that need to be flexible and dynamic is really hard to do in the matter of a set term. And so it's one of the reasons why we move to competency-based pedagogical frameworks. It's a way why we don't like the Carnegie classification system. It's why we know time on task doesn't matter in terms of learning. Like, we have to really try to break down even some of the own models that we use at institutions to even get funding to support our learners. Like, this is deep. This is deep.
The forest trees conversation and its relationship to the ability to learn in a deeper way is an amazing. It's the title of this episode. I still don't know what it's going to be, but it's something about that. And because you're exactly right, and I think you're gonna empathize with the fact that one of the things that frustrates me the most in working in the spaces that I work is that something works in the trees, or you hear a need, something is identified, and then you go up and the forest doesn't support it.
That's right.
One of the things, for example, rolling attendance models. There's an issue with students getting in required courses when they need to.
Yes.
And then they have to wait a semester if it's full.
They do. Yep. Matriculation is stalled, and timeline to degree completion is off. Yep.
And especially when we want to be more fluid and flexible in terms of, okay, this semester works best for me and my ailing grandfather. Can I take it now? Oh, it's not offered now. So we were looking at a model of perpetual courses, having a course that was running and perpetually staffed, perpetually enrollable. Like you could go in on February 2nd, or you could go in on June 12th, and you could enroll in this course. And it was blended in the sense that there were synchronous touch points.
Okay.
There were options where you could have a synchronous touch point in real life, or you could have a synchronous touch point through a video conferencing software, or you could have an asynchronous experience. And this level of flexibility, providing access, breaking down barriers in that way to the information and to the coursework itself, to the ultimate certification and their matriculation, was great. And students loved the idea. And yet registration models do not support it.
Right.
Funding.
Right.
Windows.
Yes.
Like the government.
Yes. It's the same in the US structure as well. It's a challenge.
So you want to look at these more innovative models. You want to look at providing more agency choice, the development of these competencies. And at the end of the day, there are, again, the forest and those systemic structures that are causing us ills. But I want to pull on the thread of resources, because I'd love to know your experience. And, if you have any tricks or seeing anybody do this really well, because it's hard to square the circle between innovation, change, and finances.
Yes.
But my most precious resource, and when you were talking about co-creating a fence, the first thing I thought of, time.
Yeah.
But I had content to cover in my first 2 weeks of course, Cristi. How do I do that without, and then because I also don't want to be disingenuous in terms of the spaces I'm providing and cultivating. If I want to co-create a fence with a group of students and talk about standards and what works for everybody, I have to do that over a period of at least 3 weeks. I have to allow for asynchronous communication for people who don't feel comfortable raising their hand, talking in class, right? Like that in and of itself, as a premise, makes perfect sense, but as a logical reality in the structures we have of 12-week, 16-week semesters, I'm like, time. I would, and this is true in so many things that need to be done well. The slow movement, right? Eating slower, being slower. Like the world around us is talking about this. Look, I'm like so excited. I'm like sweating. My hair is doing weird things. Oh my gosh.
This is good.
Oh, it's a real nail biter today, folks. They don't make more time. And I feel like that is one of the key issues. Yes, money is a thing. Buying technology. Yes, space is a thing. Infrastructure and rooms. These are all important resources to consider, but I always get stuck on time. Doing things well.
So yes, I think that it is a big barrier for us. And I don't know that I have the answer to it. But one of the things I challenged some accounting faculty I met with. I did a presentation about a month ago with some accounting faculty. And I said to them before I got there, give me your retention data from accounting 1 to accounting 2. We know, at least in the US, there's a lot of need to retake accounting 1 because students are not ready for the prerequisites of accounting 2. And so they share with me their stats, and they were abysmal. And I said to them, why do we believe the way that we're doing accounting 1 is the right way? If students aren't leaving your class, because to your point, we have to cover these topics, ready to engage in a way and be prepared for accounting 2, might we be just going about this the wrong way? Like, are we covering topics or are we teaching? And so I think that what I glean from that conversation is there are pockets and highlights and spots where people are having conversations using adaptive learning, thinking about CBE models, thinking about additional materials and resources. But fundamentally, I think we have to realize that our current premise in some ways is flawed. Because if indeed we were doing the right things for students now in this accounting one class and they were having deep learning experiences, they wouldn't be retaking accounting one to get to accounting two. I mean, and we can talk about anatomy of physiology, physics. I mean, there are a number of courses in math, calculus, trig, that we see this where there are these developmental milestones that students are not able to meet to then be successful. And so I always try to push faculty, push administrators, like let's color outside the lines a bit, which is why our work is so resonates so well in terms of innovation work and piloting to really figure out how might we redefine this in a way that is really successful for the learners that we serve.
And I would argue you'll find that in elementary school, students who are just passed on,
yeah,
the fact that we're not diligent. I don't know if education at any level was really designed for deep learning, Cristi. I would argue that, you think of all you could be held back, I suppose, to do it again. If you can't read or you're clearly not reaching some developmental benchmark, or they'll put you in a specialized classroom or even specialized school. But there is a great narrative of year on year, funnel them out, funnel them in, funnel them out. You're at a certain age, you're at a certain timeline. These are the things that are required and you didn't get it. It's not the system's fault.
Yeah.
It's yours.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So we need, this narrative is bigger than even just higher education. But how do you target it personally or as the vice president of academic affairs for D2L? Because I change management. We want to color outside the lines. We want to pilot some interesting projects. Do you find more success talking directly to faculty, getting them on your platform, getting them working on a learning experience, and then using that as data to convince other faculty members? Or do you feel it's more successful to go with the forest route, talk to administrators, get them to sign on to an agreement in terms of promoting a certain learning methodology and so on?
I think it's a little bit of both. I don't know if you've read the book. Michael Horn wrote a really great book, From Reopen to Reinventing Higher Education. And I love the things that you're talking about in time and space and the ways in which we've defined. He really digs in deeply around these topics. But I think when I work with our clients, I've seen it happen both ways. One, grassroots, where faculty are said, hey, we care about students in our particular discipline and we want to do this differently. And then those faculty have gone on to get awards, to get a grant, to really be able to put their institution on the map. But I've also seen institutions where the faculty are not aligned in making those kinds of decisions. And it's been a top-down approach where the administrators have said, we have made a decision. Think about Minerva University, right? And the way in which they operate. It's a very pedagogical mindset. WGU, some of the other institutions where you see a real change in framework in terms of this is how we are going to teach learners at our institution. And to be a part of our institution, here is how you need to engage and what we're looking for from you. And so, this, it's a delicate balance. Sometimes it's about building capacity and nothing helps get other faculty on buy-in online quicker than hearing from faculty that they know and trust, because there's sometimes this distrust between administrators and faculty. And in other ways, there are faculty who are screaming from the rooftops saying, I want to do more of this, but how do I get budget allocation? I was talking with a colleague yesterday, asking her, how do you think about innovations, making innovation sustainable? What are the funding models that are available? How are you thinking about the ways in which you start to evangelize some of the great things that you're doing and then take it to a systems approach? And, she had some good examples in terms of reallocations of funds or really finding resources on the margins and the ways that you can do this. But I think this is still a challenge for us in higher education to really be able to fundamentally shift and use some of these innovative approaches at scale that are in sustainable ways.
There's an interesting article, although it's not out yet, but we were colleagues of mine were working on the development of professional development platform, an online development platform, and it was publicly funded with government money to cultivate private public partnerships, which is one way of leveraging resources where everyone's going to have skin in the game.
Yep.
And the government facilitated that with seed funding.
Mm-hmm.
And then we come together, and it's in everyone's best interest to highlight their professional product as a private company, private vendor, for the public good of the outcome being made available across all institutions in Ontario. So we're writing about that as a funding model, this idea of sustaining.
I love this.
How do you sustain innovation and scale innovation? But I do want to just touch on that private public, because, you work for a private company, and it's a reality, and profits matter in a private company. How do you work to build trust when you're talking to publicly funded institutions, when you're like, no, I'm talking to you? Obviously, you have a long list of credentials behind you in terms of you as a human being. But at the end of the day, when you're meeting with somebody, a faculty member or administrator, I can see skepticism coming across that table being like, but this is ultimately in your best interest. So why should I believe?
It's a great question, and I'm glad you asked it. One of the things that was really critical for me, like I've been in higher education and in K-12 education for almost 30 years, and one of the things, and I've used every learning management system, but D2L prides itself in being a learning organization. And so hiring a role like mine in terms of VP of Academic Affairs, my whole responsibility is to continue to be a light and an opportunity to have thought leadership conversations around where education and learning is moving. But sometimes I just raise my hand and say, well, can I tell you what I did when I was associate vice provost of a campus that had over 80,000 students? Or can I share with you an example I've used in my course? Like, I think I build buy-in and trust in that I'm really here to evangelize the best practices around teaching and learning, full stop. And what I believe is in the ways in which you partner those with technology, and the work that we're doing in Brightspace does make the difference. And I've seen it. And so I can share my narratives and stories and qualitative experiences in those spaces that really get me the opportunity, which is why, I was really glad to have you on my podcast, Teach and Learn, or the blog I just wrote a couple weeks ago around AI. Like, gives me the opportunity to talk to educators as an educator. Being an educator is my first love. Like, it transcends other parts of my identity. I mean, I full story, full transparency. When I was getting my PhD, I even went and got a fitness degree. Like, I went and got a fitness certification so I could teach fitness classes. Like, if there was education to be taught, like, I am here for it. So I think on that level, on a human level of loving the profession that we're in and really wanting to be the change that we need in the world, like, I think it really reduces those barriers down. So that's what I offer.
Well, and it shines through the screen just like it shines when you're around you, Cristi. Like, I think someone always, people tend to say to me, like, your energy. This is why we also vibe. Because we have similar, like, our passion, like, we are education geeks, y'all.
That's
like,
it.
We freaking love it. Like, we are sitting in our PJs on a Sunday reading about AI and education.
That's true.
Because we love it. And it comes across. And when people say to us our energy, I think that these are the kinds of conversations. This is why it's wonderful to share this energy with people, but we share it with people in our everyday lives. And we want to keep burnout is a real thing. And I think when it comes to the challenges that we've talked about over the last hour, I think it's perseverance and patience and compassion and courage that are going to get us there. And so it's wonderful. It's wonderful to share that and see that come and shine through with you. I definitely can see that.
Well, and intellectual curiosity, right? We share that, right? Like, we are always, and many educators that I know, when I talk about being prepared to go where we've never been, I really try to build on the fact that, like, everyone in that room is intellectually curious. Everyone in that room is a lifelong learner. And so if we can lean into that passion collectively, like, man, what we can do together.
And it's true, because it's part of our neurobiological imperative. Like, we are built to be curious, intellectually curious, and to work together. I always lean back on the science,
It's true.
And it's an art form. And teaching and learning is an art form that is rooted in science. And this really takes us back to that human nature and those human skills and who we are. And that's why I'm not afraid of technology, Cristi. That's why I'm like, bring it on. It's going to let me be more me.
That's right.
And be more human. On that note, I just want to end with two last little quick questions here. I'm going to start with the more negative one first, so we end.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
But what is something about the future of education that scares you?
That's a great, oh man, you know what? No one has asked me that question.
Ah,
So one, you're stumping me. You're
I
asking
like
me
it.
in the
I like it.
moment.
Because I just mean I'm not scared of the technology. I don't think you're scared of the
I'm
technology
not scared of the
either.
technology. No, no.
But
And I'm
maybe
very,
maybe there's aspects of it you're
and
fist.
the growth mind, I am a growth mindset individual, so it's really hard for me to see something that scares me. I think what does make me afraid is the time with which it's going to take us. We got to get faster, we got to get smarter and faster. We have to reduce these barriers in terms of cost to serve. It scares me in terms of legislatively, governmentally, what it's going to take to move some of these structures and unearth some things that have been around for centuries, not just decades, but centuries, in terms of the ways in which we think of education. That scares me, and the ability to do it in a way that will allow many of our institutions to survive. That's
Mm.
the thing that scares me.
Yeah, I love it. And it's true to the growth mindset individual that you are. It's this idea of things not changing
Yeah.
and not growing and
Yes.
not evolving.
Yes.
Because stuff be broken, y'all.
Yes.
We should probably get our act together. I
That's
love it.
it.
Okay.
That's it.
And last one is, what really excites you? What gives you hope about the future of education?
Oh gosh, what gives me hope is the ways in which I think conversations like this, having more colleagues that are just like rolling their sleeves up and saying, okay, we have to figure, it's like the next generation is relying on us to figure this out. It's also in some of the young people that I've seen, and that AI, for your listeners, if you did not get a chance to catch it, it is all recorded. AI by Education conference was phenomenal to see the ways in which young people are thinking about AI, thinking about being informed and where they'd like to go. Like, man, we have a bright future ahead of us if we can harness some of that talent, and we can reduce some of the barriers between what happens with ageism and adultism, and we can just all come together and work this thing out. So
I like it, but I don't want to say kumbaya or I don't want to start singing, but I definitely is how we feel here. I'm hugging you through the screen, Cristi.
I'm hugging you too.
And I will be linking to everything, the conference and the recording that Cristi was just talking about, as well as to her podcast. And just such a pleasure. It's wonderful that you took time out of your very busy schedule to chat today. And I know that this is going to be useful and definitely inspiring. Or you'll get a good laugh out of our conversation. One of those.
Michelle, really honored to be in your presence as always. Thank you for the opportunity. I always walk away from these conversations even more invigorated and inspired around the work we're doing. So thank you.
The Education Revolution podcast is produced in-house by community members. And I'm your host, Dr. Michelle Sangera. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. And don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and head over to my website to opt in for my newsletter for more ways to connect with some of these big ideas.